Breaking news today. Video captures Ukraine's Embarkant raid behind enemy lines. Ukrainian military intelligence released a video of a cross-border attack on the western Belgorod region of Russia on Friday, claiming that the operation was successful and that Russian forces suffered casualties, according to the main Directorate of Intelligence, HUR's Telegram channel. The scouts caused another loss on the enemy after an assault on their hideout. Throughout Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, two rebel groups, the Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps, RVC, have frequented the Belgorod region bordering Ukraine, after hearing complaints from Russian servicemen about the bad circumstances in Belgorod's Gavrin district. The HUR claimed to have gotten intelligence that the Russian military leadership intended to review military positions in the area. In order to inflict losses on the enemy and worsen his morale and psychological state, special officers of the HUR of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine planned and carried out a special operation, according to the Post. In the approximately 150-second clip, a battalion of Ukrainian soldiers moves through a woodland, detonating explosives and shells from afar, according to the HUR. Its soldiers ambushed a Russian unit and mined the area. The assaults were the worst in the area since the war started in February 2022. And Putin warned that those responsible would not go unpunished. An expert from Russia's military revealed on Wednesday that footage from Russia's air defense systems showed a rocket motor ripping through a Belgorod home and into a child's bedroom. The upper block of the Pantsir S-1 rocket flew into a child's room in Belgorod, stated Ian Matveev, a Russian military analyst associated with the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which was established by opposition campaigner Alexei Navalny. In a post on X, previously Twitter, Russian Telegram channels allegedly shared the same video on X, according to a pro-Ukrainian user, Tendar, who claimed the footage showed damage to the city inflicted by Ukrainian rockets. Russian channels like Zhuist Belgorod distributed videos and pictures of missile fragments, which damaged civilian properties in Belgorod, said Tendar. They erased them, though, after realizing they belonged to the 23A6 missiles booster components of the Russian Pantsir S-1 air defense system. There needs to be an accurate accounting of American assistance to Ukraine and who exactly is responsible for the Russo-Ukrainian war as Russia steps up its efforts to weaken Western backing for the Ukrainian struggle against Putin's invasion. Some so-called experts have a conspiracy theory interpretation of President Joe Biden's motives for supporting Ukraine and a basic misunderstanding of Russia's war against Ukraine. Strangely, a lot of these views put the blame on Biden and reject the agency of Russia and Ukraine. They claim that Putin would never consent to NATO establishing a permanent presence along 1,000 miles of his country's borderland, and that the invasion of Ukraine was a result of the Biden administration's desire for Ukraine to join NATO. The theory states that Biden signed Ukraine's death sentence by attempting to have it admitted to NATO. The thing is, it never really occurred. After first declaring itself neutral in 2014, Ukraine changed its mind and decided that joining the military alliance would be the best way to protect itself from additional Russian aggression. The US and its partners were afraid of Putin's reaction if Ukraine joined NATO, therefore they refrained from pushing Ukraine to do so. The majority of Ukrainians wanted to join NATO in December 2021, and the country's foreign minister had already pleaded to join earlier in the year, so it was clear that Ukrainians wanted to join. Do you know why the Ukrainians wanted to join NATO? The Russians' intentions to subjugate them were already known to them, and they were prepared for it. Sweden and Finland, which share an 830-mile border with Russia, launched their bids for membership because they worried Russia may invade. This directly contradicted the premise that Putin would never allow NATO to border Russia. Putin responded by saying that adding these countries to NATO would not pose an immediate threat to Russia, given that Putin does not perceive any immediate danger emanating from the alliance that borders Russia, and NATO has no plans to admit Ukraine. The question arises as to why Russia actually invaded Ukraine. The Russians will tell you. Putin claims that Russia has the legal right to own the territory and people of Ukraine because the country is not a true independent nation. The Ukrainian people are really Russians trying to hide their true identity, and the Ukrainian identity is a fabrication. Dmitry Medvedev, a former president of Russia, claimed that the Ukrainian state came into existence by accident. This justification is evident in the words and actions of Russia's top officials about the occupied Ukrainian territory. Under Russian occupation, Ukrainians are being pressured to adopt Russian names, signs in Ukrainian are being replaced with Russian ones, and adoption laws in Russia have been changed to ensure that tens of thousands of children abducted into Russian adoptions are raised as Russians instead, a situation that clearly qualifies as cultural genocide according to international law. The elimination of Ukrainian culture serves solely to erase the concept of Ukrainians as an independent people, and has zero bearing on Russian national security. There is zero correlation between Russia's massive missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian maternity facilities, schools, and apartments and national security. Rather, it is an attempt to intimidate and subdue the Ukrainian people. Somehow, those who contend that Russia is only acting in self-defense avoid confronting the reality of Russia's actions. Another strange theory is circulating, which is that Biden, not Russia, is to blame for the deaths of tens of thousands of Ukrainians. A writer has stated that Biden chose to use the American people as the cash cow and Ukrainians as the flesh to throw in Putin's meat grinder, as well as if Congress doesn't stop Biden, the slaughter of Ukrainians will continue through 2024 and beyond. It appears the author believes the battle would cease if Biden, who is known to be bloodthirsty, did not continue to provide military aid to Ukraine. This conflict is about the survival of the Ukrainian people against an aggressive force that is determined to destroy them, so they have made it obvious that they would fight regardless of whether they receive aid or not. Who could blame Ukrainians for wanting to fight until they have freed all of their people after seeing the horrors of mass sexual violence, hearing accounts of mass graves being dug up, and experiencing the torment that those Ukrainians living under Russian rule endured? To put Americans in Ukraine's shoes, it's impossible to fathom how they could allow their own countrymen to be subjected to such atrocities. Both Biden and the US are not to blame for the deaths of Ukrainians at the hands of Russia's invasion troops. The blame lies with Russia, which is waging an aggressive and self-initiated war. Russian troops committed horrific crimes by inflicting rapes and torture. American aid is a lifeline for Ukraine, thanks to Biden and the American people. It gives Ukrainians a fighting chance for freedom and stops Russia from expanding the war beyond Ukraine and invading other European countries, including NATO allies. A typical Russian talking point that some Westerners are repeating is that Ukraine, the most corrupt country in Europe, is no more of a democracy than Russia is. The claim is ridiculous and can be readily disproven. For almost 20 years, Putin and his inner circle have used rigged elections to maintain his grip on power in Russia, all the while destroying the country's free press, political opposition, and civic society. At the same time, no president has been re-elected in Ukraine's competitive elections held every 2 decades. Since becoming an independent nation, the Ukrainian people have successfully revolted against corrupt presidents on 2 separate occasions. An important factor in Ukraine's ability to withstand Russia's invasion has been the country's active civil society, and the country's independent press has bravely covered the conflict and the government's mistakes in order to hold it to account. Democracy at work there. The future elections in Ukraine are a legitimate topic of discussion, as are the responsibilities of the media and political opposition throughout the conflict. The top Ukrainian civic groups are formally requesting that the country's elections be postponed until the war in the east calms down, as was the case in Britain during World War II, so that the enemy cannot use air raids on voting places. President Volodymyr Zelensky's administration is rightfully under pressure from Western governments and the media to meet its democratic commitments. As 2024 approaches, the US is at a crossroads. The only way Russia can win the conflict with Ukraine is if the United States abandons the Ukrainian people. With Congress putting off funding, anti-Ukraine groups in Washington are plotting their next move. Instead of calling for peace, the experts spreading these lies are urging the world to turn a blind eye to the atrocities committed by Russia in their annexation of Ukraine.